How you going?
Going great. How are you?
I'm pretty good. We'll get straight into it. I mean, the reality that we're facing is pretty grim. It really hasn't changed. I remember learning about this stuff as a teenager and then very consciously deciding to stop learning about it because it's overwhelming. It makes you feel sad. It makes you feel powerless. And even just talking about it gives me this kind of feeling in my body where it's like, ugh, there's cortisol. It's like really fight and flight stuff. So, is that feeling or activating that feeling, is that what's going to get us there?
Well, if anyone's feeling worried about climate change, it's an entirely rational response because this year we are already shaping up that 2024 will be the warmest year on record. And when you think about that, for a minute, if you take a breath and you really focus on it just for a second, it's horrifying. And what's worse is that the genuine and rational fears that we're feeling are being weaponised and exploited by those very interests that seek to delay the action that's required. So we've got vested interests in the coal, oil and gas industries that are, well-resourced, and they are working against the interests of all of us, of all peoples, particularly the people in places that did the least to cause this problem. Disinformation is being intentionally spread to sow division and undermine our democracy. And, misinformation is spreading because of algorithms and the way that our new technology world has evolved. And people believe what they read. It's not unreasonable.
You mean I shouldn't believe everything I read on Instagram?
Yeah, well, maybe I'd be questioning things a little bit. I'm sure everyone here does. But apart from all of those gigantic problems, don't worry, we'll come out of the basement soon. But, change is actually hard. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around. We'd love this to be easier. And so it's entirely reasonable to feel overwhelmed, to feel frozen, to feel that cortisol surging through your body. And I think the way we resolve that for ourselves, for this moment, for our communities, is to actually think about the news story that we need to be writing and socialising that. And that's why events like this tonight are so important. So here's a few examples. So this year, $2 trillion will be spent on renewable technology and infrastructure, which is twice what will be invested in fossil fuels. So that's pretty great. And it's not where we were a few years ago. The European Union has put in place a world-first nature restoration law that will have cascading consequences throughout that collaboration of nations. And back here at home, the First Nations Clean Energy Network, which was only established a couple of years ago, is now working with the federal government to write a First Nations clean energy strategy. And I should acknowledge elders past and present on Cammeraygal land tonight. In Australia, we're almost at around 39 to 40% renewable energy. And there's almost 4 million solar homes, solar rooftops. And, does anyone feel the energy in their bodies just changing a little bit with some of those small examples? These are the stories that start to create the positive emotions that will create virtuous cycles in ourselves, in our conversations, in our industries and in our communities. So we have the opportunity now to paint the future with the present, with what's actually happening right now.
And for you, was there a specific moment where, you read something or you heard something that kind of, translated, I guess, the noise around climate into something that was a bit more high fidelity, this is my problem, I better, what was the thing?
So It's kind of funny because I'm a total progressive nerd, and I, got sent one of, if people know the organisation Get Up that campaigns for fair and equal society and a safe environment and First Nations justice. About a decade ago, they sent one of their member surveys out that asked, what issues should we campaign on? And there was a really long list of issues. And I went through and I was like, this is ridiculous. I could tick every single box. And then it made me take another look, and I realised that climate change was going to undermine everything that I cared about and everything I'd worked on. So that moment of intersectionality hit, because climate change makes the social fabric that we need to have social cohesion, it makes that very brittle. And so that was like a moment of really principled panic, right?
Yeah, so principled panic.
Principled panic.
Yeah, right. I've never heard of that, but I like it.
It's a new thing, yeah. Well, that was the kind of theoretical, principled kind of, analysis panic. And then, when the Black Summer fires happened, I was, like many of you probably did, had to pack up the house and think about, what would we do if we needed to evacuate. And I just live in suburban streets in the Illawarra, just south from here, on Dharawal country. And when I saw my children's faces in that moment, I had actual panic. So they kind of consolidated views and kind of pushed me on to the next kind of step in my own climate journey. And we're all on our own climate journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is, if people are feeling a bit freaked out about climate change, I realised through some research that I'm just going to show you that I'm not alone, and you're not alone either. So this is the Climate Compass, which is a research project that shows that more than half of all Australians are either alarmed or concerned about climate change. And so most of the country is really worried. So you're not alone.
Yeah.
Our political and debate and the narrative that runs publicly sometimes feels like it's an even match. It's not. Most people really worry about climate change. And so we have an activity for you now. Shall we go to that?
Yeah.
If you get your phones out, you can just take a photo and see which of the Climate Compass segments you belong to. And this is based on a 4-year research project that's been done in a couple of rounds that looks at Australian attitudes to climate change, a segmentation analysis it's called for some of the wonks.
It's really interesting, just like looking at that, I'm sure it looks like a fire danger warning by design, but when you kind of look at all those words and what is underlying them, it's really just fear, right? Is that the core feeling?
I think so. Is it working for you? Okay, who's alarmed? Shock. That's why you're all here. Concern? Some concern there? I think we've got a lot of alarmed folks in the audience.
Yeah.
So, and that's what's driving you to this event, right? And so when we think about what's going to motivate people, what motivates people is different depending on where you might sit in that attitudinal kind of spread on climate. And so if you're in the alarmed category, as I definitely am, as you definitely are, as many of you are here tonight, you'll be really motivated by fairness, justice, what future generations need. But folks who are, believe in climate change but are not quite as freaked out in those more concerned or cautious segments, we need to remove a barrier for those people. They need reassurance that we've got a secure economic future if we transition our economy and society. And, preeminent economist Ross Garnaut tells us that Australia can actually be 8% of the world's decarbonisation solution, which is enormous when you consider we're 0.3% of the population. So we need to remove those barriers. But more importantly than that, we need social proof and networks. So seeing people like them taking action on climate change is really compelling. And there's a terrific organisation called Climate for Change that specialises in climate conversations one-on-one and in groups, and people actually turn up for them.
Wow.
Like you all have tonight. They talk about the fact that it's really emotions, connection, and conversations with people that you trust that will drive people to take their next step. Not facts, not hard facts, not guilt, not shame.
Yeah, and I guess you probably also need a way to see where you fit in this whole thing. Like, there's nothing worse than somebody dumping a whole lot of problems on you, scaring the crap out of you, and then not even giving you any kind of answer or anything to do with it. I guess in terms of, like, just on that sort of note of, sure, it's good to understand how people feel, but what's the to-do list? Like, if I'm sort of sitting there going, I'm alarmed, but I'm ready to get off the couch, I'm ready to do a thing, like, what's a thing? Write me a to-do list, Claire.
There's so many things, which is part of the overwhelm.
I just want 3 things.
Oh, 3 things.
Yeah.
Well, if individually, doing the thing that is most proximate to you, that you care about most, is going to give you the most satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
But then, that might be switching your bank, and telling them why you're leaving, changing your super, like moving your money and making that the reason. That's very clear to those companies. Connecting with community and doing local things, because the resilience we're going to need in our communities for what's coming is really important. So building those connections. And then, I am an advocate, and I have seen time and time again the outsized impact that everyday people can have if they come together and push for policy change, push for action by companies. It does make a difference, even though the specific actions you might be taking can feel quite small. And we've got an enormous mission in front of us. We've got to get, the Climate Council tells us that we need to get to 75% emissions reductions by 2030 and net zero by 2035. The International Energy Agency tells us there can be no more coal, oil and gas projects built around the world. And there are about 100 fossil fuel projects in some phase of development in this country right now. And our Environment Minister has got 25 projects on the approval list. We've got to restore nature. We've got to get biodiversity back to positivity. We need community involvement in how this transition is going to happen, and tangible benefits sharing. Stock standard community consultation is not going to cut it anymore. We need no-go zones, so nature is protected. But we also need to work out where we can develop sensitively and sustainably. And we need to back First Nations leadership and get out of the way. And I'd really encourage you again to go and have a look at the First Nations Clean Energy Network. So that's just the short list, but you can sum it up by saying we just want more. And going for more and getting small successes on the way will help you feel more motivated in what you're doing every day.
Yeah, it's definitely the time to go for broke, right? And, never underestimate the power of a well-written letter, especially when it's copied and pasted a lot of times and jams a political inbox. It's super annoying. People go, oh, no one's going to read this, no one's going to read this. They read it. People really do read it, and it matters. And I think, we can't really expect that systemic change and that political bravery unless we're, as citizens willing to support that, and then, also just be that annoying person in the ear of your brother. Not that I have a brother who's annoying or who might not believe in climate change. Anyone else? Yeah, right. But no, that's really important. And so, just on a sort of personal note, this is hard work, and it's long work, and it's never going to end. How do you kind of keep yourself motivated? Because last time I saw you, I was like, oh, there's a great show called Pachenko on Netflix, and you could just sit and watch that all the time. It's there's endless distraction. How do we avoid this kind of collective procrastination, distraction, which is, again, a very rational response to fear, to shut down? How do you kind of energise yourself and keep going?
I think I follow Dr. Diana Elizabeth Johnson's work from the All You Can Save project, and she talks about this wonderful Venn diagram between finding your joy, identifying what you're good at, and then looking at what's required now. And I add to that, which is work out where your networks are, because, if you can find the connection between those areas, you'll find your pathway through. And, that's why I've made the decision to, make my day job around the advocacy work, the story work, because that's what I'm good at, what I love doing, but it also makes a difference. And but bigger than that. I kind of made a decision a couple of years ago, as we were all going through the throes of the second Sydney lockdown, to just be hopeful. I chose to be hopeful. I make intentional decisions to look for good news. Because, as Rebecca Solnit writes, hope is gritty and messy, and there'll be as many disappointments as there are victories on our collective climate journey. But it's worth it. And what I see in all of us and all people, our messy, broken human selves that we are, is incredible potential. And that I find enormously exciting. And that's why you're all here. So I don't think this is like a dinner and a show. It's actually time to get some work done. And I am so excited about what could be sparked, what the potential is of the network in this room. So let's get to it, shall we?
Thank you, Claire O'Rourke. Thanks for igniting a little fire in our bellies. Please join me in thanking Claire.